All righty, folks. Well, it looks like we've got some people coming on. We're up to about 73 participants. Usually we're up to about 120 to 130, so we're lagging a little bit, but we'll get started this afternoon. Well, good afternoon to you all, and welcome to another edition of the Kansas Association of Counties and the Governor's Office of Recovery Spark CARES Act Funding Zoom webinars. I'm Bruce Cladney, the host, Kansas Association of Counties Executive Director. And as you can see on the line also as well as Vijay Ramasamy, who is going to be taking over here in just a few seconds. Wanted to add a few comments before we get started here. Please make sure that you mute your lines when you come on board. Obviously, the people that aren't on board yet can't hear that request, but hopefully I set the Zoom up that the microphones should not be on when you come on, but if you happen to find that your microphone is on, please go ahead and turn it off, and I try to keep track of that as well. Also, if you have not already signed up for the listserv, please send to me your email address, your name obviously, and the county that you're working in. My email address is my last name, as you can see on the screen, is spelled CHLADNY at kansascounties.org, and we'll get you added to the list. We've got well over 80 participants. I think we're actually approaching 90 participants on the listserv list, and basically that's a way for you all to stay in contact with your peers across the state who are deeply involved in this very project that you are working on. If you have already sent to either myself or to Jay or to Kim Qualls or to Dornella your name and email address, and you're not getting anything from the CARES Act funding listserv, please let us know, because things have been going back and forth now for several weeks. And so if you're not getting anything in your inbox from the listserv, that must mean something is not happening for you. So please make sure you reach out to us. And remember, the listserv is not an official determination. It's not an official spot where you're going to get the final answer to any of your requests, but it certainly is a great spot to get some of your peer feedback to how they're handling the situations. I've seen a lot of great choices, great questions about utility reimbursements, after-school programs, and the list goes on and on and on of people asking different questions about how you all are handling this situation across the state, and so on and so forth. So be sure to do that. So without any further ado, Vijay, I'm going to turn it over to you. This probably possibly be the last time we get to have you on the Zoom with us, but you never say never, right, in this world?
Thanks, Bruce. I appreciate it. So today we've got a couple of great updates. Some new federal guidance has come in, so we'll go through that here in a second. And then first, as I start the presentation here, our Department of Commerce has been working incredibly hard to get round 2 programs up and running as it relates to the small business grant program and some other exciting programs that they're working on. And so here, before we get started on our federal hopefully everybody can hear me. As we get started on our federal updates and recovery office updates, as well as FAQs, I wanted to give Samir from Department of Commerce some time to go through the updates that he has as it relates to round 2. I know that many of you were probably on Department of Commerce's webinar this morning, and I know that they're doing lots of outreach to businesses and communities, but I wanted to make sure to have him on board to give some updates today. So Samir, if you're on the line, do you want to take over here and let us know your updates?
Yep, Vijay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you all for joining. I know that the invitation that went out for this morning's webinar included this list here. So appreciate everybody that was able to join this morning. We went through, there's 10 different programs that we outlined this morning. I'm not going to go through all 10 of them again. It takes a good bit of detail in each one of them to go into. We will be sending out copies of the webinar as well as the slide deck at some point, I'm hoping today, to this list, so you can view. If you didn't have a chance to make it onto the webinar this morning, you'll be able to watch it at some point. Biggest thing I wanted to share is the sort of important dates, the slide that we have up right now. The portal at kansascommerce.gov will open tomorrow, Thursday, August 13th at 4 o'clock. The applications will be posted. However, important to note that we will not be accepting applications until the following Wednesday at noon. This is so that businesses, members of your communities, have a chance to gather their materials, gather everything that we'll be asking for to be able to have a good chance to just be ready when we actually start accepting applications at noon next week. So like I mentioned, we'll be sending out a link. There'll be a press release that goes out. There'll be a number of materials related to social media and other things that we'll be sending out to this list as well. My biggest request is that if you could just watch for Kansas Department of Commerce's social media channels, share what you can, share the press release with the folks in your communities. We're really just trying to get the word out so that everybody knows what will be happening, what is sort of expected, and the things that they'll need to be able to complete a successful application. So that's all I had for right now. We will have, there's an email address, backtobusiness.ks.gov. They'll be accepting questions related to Spark Round 2 funding, specifically related to the Department of Commerce's Spark Round 2 funding. Feel free to send messages there. And that's all I had for now.
Thank you, Samir. I think we had one question here in the chat as it relates to how long the review process is going to be. I know you put it in here. Is there any timeline on after the applications are submitted, how quickly applicants may receive a response or funds are expected to go out?
So it sort of depends. There's a couple, like I said, there's a couple different types of grants. Some of them will be dependent on how long funds are still remain available. But I don't have an answer for that yet.
Okay, perfect. So we'll continue to have folks from Department of Commerce here on our webinars as they have more updates, but also I would let everybody know that Department of Commerce is going to be putting out their own webinars, communications, materials. I know many of you were on this morning's webinar, so continue to stay connected with them as we move forward. Thank you, Samir, and we'll definitely have you back as we move forward here.
Thanks, everyone.
So, and we'll definitely get to the questions as it relates to round one here at the end. I wanted to start with some Office of Recovery updates. The first thing is incredibly exciting for us is that we've brought on Doug Gerber as our County Projects Director, who will take over the webinars, working with all of you to develop a smooth process for review and approval of direct aid plans as well as reimbursement reporting plans, and ensure that your reporting moving forward is as smooth as possible. So we're really excited to have Doug here. He has years and years of experience at the city level as a assistant city manager and as a city administrator, and has done a lot of work with counties and cities before. So we're excited to have Doug. You'll see Doug soon on one of these webinars. So excited to welcome him on. And like Bruce mentioned, I'll be transitioning off here pretty soon. So you'll see Doug's face moving forward, and we're excited about that. Round one, we've posted a single FAQ document. The latest version we have is the 8.7 version that is on the website. The last couple of webinars, we didn't see any new questions that weren't specifically answered in previous webinars or in previous FAQs. And so we haven't added new questions to the FAQ sheet, but as we move forward here, we will add new questions as we see new questions arise. But the single FAQ document that's on the website that you have seen in the previous webinar does include all the questions that we have answered, as well as all of the general eligibility interpretations that we've made. So you can definitely look there, and that's searchable for all of the different questions that you may have. We continue to have provided continue to provide guidance interpretation responses. Again, we want to try to phase that process out as much as possible, but we provided over 150 individual interpretations and continue to provide the more general ones in the FAQ document. And that many of you are sharing those via the listserv, so we appreciate you doing that. And then we continue to, I know we have some additional questions to answer. I promise you we're getting those back to you. We've done over 200 of these more general questions via the Recovery Office email inbox, and we'll continue to get responses back to you and answer those via the webinar or via other sources. I want to just put another plug in here that we've answered a lot of questions and we've tried to address a lot of different topics. And so first start with the toolkit, the FAQ document, these presentations for initial answers to your questions. And then if you don't see something there, please let us know via the recovery inbox moving forward. We plan to provide you some additional details soon on what the approval process is going to look like as you submit your plans. Again, the two reports, the reimbursement reporting spreadsheet and the direct aid plan, are due on 8/15. There is a grace period until Monday at 5 p.m. if you're not able to submit it by Saturday. We have received a number of direct aid plans and reimbursement reporting spreadsheets already. I believe we've received about 15 of those so far from my last check. You should receive an email confirmation once submitted. We're still going through and giving those confirmations, so you should receive one by the end of the week if you've already submitted your reports. If you will submit your reports over the weekend or Monday, you'll still receive an email confirmation saying that, hey, we have received your reports. We are working to finalize the consultant accounting contract that'll help us ensure that we have the support that we need as it relates to reviewing and approving these reports. Related to that, the State Finance Council approved the funding for that consultant contract on Monday for the Recovery Office, and so that'll fast track our ability to get a firm in as early next week, and so we'll be able to get you responses and a standardized process and more information on that in the coming week, but we're excited about that. The other things that the State Finance Council approved, I will draw your attention to the $60 million investment for connectivity for round 2 was approved. That includes $50 million in money for investments in broadband infrastructure, and then $10 million in support for low-income customers to get access to broadband services. And so I wanted to say that that rounds out the approval process for round 2 at the State Finance Council level. And so all 4 buckets, public health, education, connectivity, and economic development, have been approved. And so you'll see more information in the coming weeks about how those are going to be operationalized. Talking about operationalizing those plans, agencies like you just heard Samir talk about are finalizing their applications for round 2 programs at the state level. And so you will see some more information on these webinars, as well as webinars or communications from those specific agencies themselves as it relates to application deadlines, the applications themselves, where to apply, and how quickly businesses and other partners will receive responses. And so watch out for those, and we'll continue to put those in these presentations as we receive them. And as you move forward, Spark steering and executive committee meetings, as well as State Finance Council meetings, all the materials will be posted at the link there. There was a Spark steering committee update meeting today. There will be more kind of joint meetings between the Spark steering and executive committee moving forward. Once we have dates for those, I'll definitely let you know, and they'll be posted on Public Square, and the materials will be posted on the website. But again, there was a quick update meeting for the Spark steering committee today that did not include any decision making. That was just an update on where we're at so far for those members, and some discussion about what they'd like to see in round 3. And so that recording should be up soon if you'd like to view that as well. Some additional clarifications. I just want to point out again that I know many of you, I appreciate it, have been sharing how much you expect a single audit to cost. Again, if you've received more than $750,000, you will be subject to a federal audit. We are expecting some additional guidance on that, but for now, we're asking counties to hold some funds aside if you qualify for a federal audit to deal with the cost of that audit. From our current understanding, you will be able to hold funds over beyond December 30th to pay for that federal audit. I know we've been getting some estimates from $7,500 to $10,000. Some are even lower, and so it may depend on the specific firm that you're using, but those are the estimates about how much money ballpark that should be set aside. Again, we've been any estimates anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 I've seen, and maybe even lower. So I wanted to post that there. And additionally, the federal audit guidance and links to more information on what a federal audit looks like, if you haven't been through one of those, is on our website as well. Additional clarifications, I think we've gotten some questions around donations. Can you reimburse an entity for donations? No, that is not an eligible expense. That's been a consistent question because a lot of outside partners, companies have donated PPE or donated other supplies or services to counties or other entities. And I know some people have asked, can I give money back to those entities for the donations that they've provided, whether it be staff that they've provided on a pro bono basis or supplies? And the answer is no, that is not an eligible expense. And even if your small business did not close, they can still receive money to cover their losses. That includes nonprofits as well. Finally, I know there's been a lot of discussion around private schools and colleges. I just want to be very clear that private schools and colleges are eligible for reimbursements at the county level. According to the county resolution, you're only required to provide reimbursements to public educational institutions and municipalities, but you have the option to provide reimbursements to private colleges and schools. They were not included in the round 2 higher education investments at the state level. So we've encouraged counties to help field some of the requests as it relates to reimbursements for private colleges. Again, is your discretion on how and what level you provide those reimbursements. But we've said if a private college is in your community and is an anchor institution in your community, those are the types of investments that you should be considering, because round 1 funds that were provided to you are for community level investments. And so that is not just for private colleges, that's for any sorts of entities that you want to provide reimbursements to, as long as the individual reimbursements are for COVID related expenditures. And so all of the reimbursements you're providing are for COVID-19 related expenditures. You can provide reimbursements to a whole host of entities. It's just the ones that are required are those public educational institutions and municipalities. Again, you have the option for anything other than those entities. And again, continue to engage with us if you have questions about how we do that. In round 3, we haven't made any decisions about where we're going to be spending money, but you'll receive some more guidance and information from us as we develop that process. I hope that this was resolved, but again, if you're having any issues with protected sheets in your reports, the password is do not use. If you put that in there, none of the sheets should be protected. Again, we posted an updated version that should have taken care of this issue, but if you're still having that issue, please look there. Next steps for guidance interpretation requests. I put this in here the last couple of presentations. I won't spend too much time on it, but again, I want to say, start with COVID-19 related priorities, your goods, programs, and then focus on the investments that need to happen to meet those priorities, not the other way around. That'll help you ensure that all items are necessary COVID-19 expenses. There's also a difference between nice to have and necessary for COVID-19. We need to focus as much as possible on necessary to COVID-19, and that includes those community level investments that in childcare, in rent assistance and business support that are really important and that are clearly necessary, as well as testing and PPE and things like that. And so focus on those types of investments and continue to work with the resources that we've provided you, whether it be the FAQs, whether it be the webinars, whether it be your own internal legal staff, to figure out justifications or figure out determinations for eligibility of expenses as much as possible. And again, always come back to what is necessary for the COVID-19 pandemic and use the previous determinations we've made to help guide your thinking. As we talk about prioritizing community level investments, as we get into the home stretch here and you all are providing your plans for us to review, I just want to reiterate that round one funding is intended to help you address community level needs. And so that looks different across communities. Some communities, it may be that a few businesses are really critical to your community, and so you want to provide them some support. Other communities, it may be a private institution, or it may be a nursing home that really needs extra support. And so think about your community level needs and think about the long-term investments that are related to COVID-19 that you want to make, whether it be helping get a 90-day supply of PPE in your community, helping childcare providers in your community as we look to the school year and as we look to reopening our economy. Childcare is an incredibly important need, and making sure that your investments stretch there is really, really important, because we know that the amount of money we've gotten is not enough to meet the demand. And so every dollar that can be invested back in the community in those critical services like childcare is what is going to be needed. And the last thing I'd say is, as you look towards the investments, think about things like broadband, think about things like rent and utility assistance, ways to create investments in your communities that will really address the specific impacts of COVID-19 that have highlighted already existing inequalities in our systems and already existing vulnerabilities for a lot of our population. So I want to draw your attention back to this slide, which many of you have seen. It's in the toolkit. This is kind of our playbook as it relates to how we want to be thinking about these investments. And I would draw your attention to part 4 here, those long-term investments that you can make in your community using these funds that'll help you beyond the pandemic, but also help you really invest and ensure that you're prepared for any spikes in the pandemic and any changes that you see as it relates to disease mitigation. So continue to use this and draw your attention to columns 3 and 4 as you're thinking about how to support your communities with these investments. New federal guidance. So we did receive additional federal guidance on 8/10. That's available on the federal government's website at treasury.gov. The link is here if you want to click that and you want to get access to that federal guidance. I've copied and pasted all of the new additions here. It's questions 49 through 52. They took a play out of our playbook here, and they, as you all have told us, they've numbered all of the questions, and they've now started telling us what's new. And so we're appreciative of that, just like I know that you guys are appreciative that we started doing that as well to help you all navigate the FAQ a little bit easier. So the FAQ includes 4 new questions, and I'll go through them here. The first one is that you can use the funds to satisfy non-federal matching requirements. I know that that's been a consistent question. I would look to go, if you are interested in this question, please look at the full text and what they're specifically referring to. But again, you are able to use it for non-federal matching requirements, for example, the FEMA match. Next, I know there's been a lot of questions around if you provide grants or loans to businesses, is that taxable income? So the first question is related specifically to grants. Grants, yes. The receipt of a government grant by a business is generally not excluded from a business's gross taxable income, and so a grant would be taxable. Next, loans. So generally the guidance says that the receipt of loan proceeds is not gross income. However, if a government forgives all or a portion of the loan, that amount of the loan that is forgiven is generally included in the gross income of the business and is taxable unless an exclusion in section 108 of the code or other federal law applies. And so what we can take away here is if it's a grant or it is something that is forgiven to that business, then it is considered gross income that is taxable, otherwise not. The last question I think is really important and really underscores the reason why we are actually talking about giving the importance of giving grants versus loans. So it clearly says that if you are providing a business a loan, that the only way that you can spend the money for that loan or provide that loan is if all of the money that you've provided them is paid back in full by December 30th, and the proceeds of that loan are used by December 30th. So I would, if you're thinking about providing loans, I would read this question very specifically, because it says that in order for the cost to be eligible, the cost has to be paid back by December 30th. The loan has to be paid back by December 30th, and the proceeds of that loan that you receive have to be spent. And so it's incredibly difficult to do a revolving loan program, for example, for businesses. And so the only way to ensure that the loan is an eligible expense is to confirm that they can pay it back by December 30th. And so that's why we're pushing folks to include grants instead of loans, because it's going to be much easier for you all to manage. And so please read those questions in detail if you're providing loans, and we'll provide additional clarification as needed. Finally, I want to note that this federal guidance was not at all as expansive as we were hoping or as that we were expecting. Again, we don't have any additional details as it relates to capital projects. So I know that they mentioned on the previous webinar federally that only temporary facilities are allowed. We still don't know what that means. And so we're still waiting on additional guidance for that. We're also waiting for additional guidance on setting aside funds for closeout costs like potential audits, for construction projects like I mentioned. And the most important thing that we're still waiting on is additional guidance as it relates to payroll costs. So we are hearing that the federal government may tighten up eligible payroll expenses. And so I know that right now their guidance is substantially dedicated to COVID-19. And so we are hearing that they may tighten that up to limit what you can act and be more specific on what you can actually credit towards payroll expenses. We don't know what that means yet. And so we're recommending that you try to take a little bit more of a conservative approach to payroll. And so avoid crediting an entire agency, for example, to CRF. So if you have to avoid taking your entire health department and crediting them towards the coronavirus relief fund money. And again, try to focus on those community level investments in broadband childcare and in business grant programs that we talked about earlier, because we are still waiting for additional guidance on payroll costs, and we are expecting it. And once we do, we will let you know. And if it happens after you've submitted your direct aid plan, we'll definitely give you a chance to readjust that plan as it relates to the additional guidance. But as of right now, the guidance that we have is the guidance that we're going to go with, but know that that might be something that's coming down the line. I want to reiterate here that we did get new reporting guidance as of 7/31. It does not change the forms that you are going to submit by 8/15. However, we'll give you a new form moving forward, and we're still working on that form. And I know that you all are waiting for that, and we'll try to get you that as soon as possible. But the forms that you have to submit by Friday, the direct aid plan and the reimbursement reporting spreadsheet, both don't change as it relates to the new federal reporting requirements, but you will have a new reporting sheet moving forward. FAQs. I won't go through these again, because I know that we've talked about these at length, but performance of delivery of a cost must occur during the covered period. Again, that means if you're hiring folks, you can only pay them for services they complete up to December 30th. If you're paying for something like a hotspot, you can only pay for those services, internet services, up to December 30th as it currently stands. And you can use the money for the FEMA match. Payroll reporting, I won't go through this again, but I wanted to draw your attention to hazard pay. We've gotten a lot of questions around hazard pay. This is taken directly from the federal guidance that hazard pay means additional pay for performing hazardous duty or work as it relates to COVID-19. You can use the funding for hazard pay as long as it is for directly COVID-19 related activities. That includes public safety, public health, healthcare, human services, and similar employees who are substantially dedicated to mitigating or responding to COVID-19. So you can't provide hazard pay across the board to all your employees during COVID-19, you have to specifically only provide hazard pay to those that are substantially dedicated to mitigating or responding to COVID-19. And those can be EMS workers, public health workers, public safety workers that are clearly dedicated to combating COVID-19. And so general hazard pay across the board is not an allowed expense. So I know I went through that pretty quickly here. Before we get into next steps, I wanted to just go through the chat and give you all a chance to ask some questions. And so now there's a lot of questions in the chat, so I will try to go through them as much as possible. Give me 1 second here, I apologize. Okay, perfect. So let's go through this here. So will we be notified when it's been received? You should be receiving a notification. If you haven't gotten a notification yet, please wait till the end of the week. We will be giving you notifications that you have submitted your plan. For encumbrances that were incurred prior to August 1st, however not paid for, can they be a reimbursement? If not, can they put in a direct aid if they were paid for? Yes and yes, I'll explain that here. So you can provide reimbursements beyond the August 1st deadline, just included in the report for that month. And if you want to put it in your direct aid plan, you just have to illustrate it as a plan independent expenditure or what have you in your direct aid plan. And then when you do make that transfer, then put it in whatever reporting sheet that you submit for that month. And you have an encumbrance incurred from August 1st to whenever the direct aid is approved. How will we handle that? The next reporting spreadsheet will include that period from August 1st to when you're submitting your direct aid plan. So you can just include it in there. We haven't released that report in template yet, but we will do that soon. So that will include the reporting period for August 1st to, I believe, September 15th or September 1st, I'm not sure. If we're doing assistance to families with rent utilities, can vehicle tags be considered within that, or is that considered a tax and not eligible? I don't know the specific answer to that question, Jana. I'm gonna have to get back to you here in a second. So I apologize, I'll get back to you. There's a question about Spark meetings next week. They can involve a dual meeting of exec and steering. Do we have a date and time for that? I don't have a date and time for you right now, unfortunately, but we will put out a notification on Public Square, and on Friday, if I have the time, I'll put it in the presentation. There's a question about small businesses and nonprofit programs. Can you specify how exactly that report will look? Is it a separate tab per recipient in that small business program or summarized in one? Is there an example that you can point us to? So if you're talking about how to illustrate that program, you would put it in, for now, you would put it in the direct aid plan. And so there is a tab for business or nonprofit programs or any sort of program in the direct aid plan. And so you'd fill one of those out that includes a budget narrative and that includes a specific budget and some program details. As to how to report that moving forward, we will give you a new spreadsheet for reporting all of the expenses as it's related to those programs. And so I don't have that with me yet, but that'll include a way for you to illustrate what expenses that you have paid out for that month for that specific program. The few questions, I think we've answered those. A person starting a new business, can they apply for funding? I don't believe so, but I think it depends on the specific programs as it relates to commerce. I know they have a number of programs. And so if a person's starting a new business, I don't know if there's a specific program associated with that. Once we release the details about eligibility, that question will be answered. There's an 8.7 Excel for reimbursements posted. Does that make the one from 7/15 out of date? No, it does not. Both of those are the same except for some bug fixes that some folks were asking for. And so if you didn't have any of those bugs, then you don't need to worry about it. But there's no substantial difference between those two versions. The next question here is, I was told that this upcoming funding will require organizations and businesses to show a decrease in revenue between the first half of 2019 and the first half of 2020. This puts companies and organizations that have seasonal funding fluctuations at a massive disadvantage. Is there a way for them to show apples to apples in a different period? Again, I don't know the specifics of that, but I will provide this feedback, and I know I'll chat with Samir afterwards about this specific piece of feedback. And if we have an update on the Friday webinar, I'll let you know, but I will provide that piece of feedback to Samir. I know, so one person said they have sent out August 5th and have not received a confirmation. I'll check on that right after this, but you should receive a confirmation by the end of the week if you haven't received a confirmation. So I think there was a question about a response that was given as it relates to how the state will approve or disapprove of 8 of the submissions. So we will let you know, and I know that we're still, and we'll give you some more information hopefully on Friday or early next week about what the approval process will look like. But as of right now, we are going to tell you if there is an ineligible expenditure in your direct aid plan that needs to be reclassified. And so I think that's what they meant by tell you if you're specifically wrong. We're not going to go through and say this is approved, this is disapproved, this is approved, this is disapproved. We'll only tell you specific line items that are not eligible. I think what they meant was we're not going to provide you a response on every single line item. We'll just provide you what is ineligible that you need to reclassify. And that's what they meant by we'll tell you if there's something that is incorrect. How do I get on the notification list for these webinars? Nelson, I appreciate you putting that email in there. Oh, I think there was an error today, an accident on our part on not posting it on Public Square. We apologize for that. The recording of that meeting is up on YouTube and was live during the meeting. I apologize that that wasn't on Public Square. I know, as I mentioned, we're expanding our staff quite a bit and going through some transition, and so that was a mistake on our part. But moving forward, they will be on Public Square, and as soon as we have them, we'll post them in these. Webinars, these webinar presentations, and if we need to, we'll also provide them via email as we see them. But again, there should be the Public Square is the best place to check, and I apologize that that wasn't in there. If you hold funds in the potential audit and that audit never comes, what happens to those funds in 5 years? Those funds, I don't have an answer to that question right now. We haven't gotten any specific guidance on that. I assume that those funds will be returned back to the federal government, but I don't know a specific answer on that until we get some more guidance on being able to hold funds beyond December 30th for audit purposes. Again, today's meeting on Spark was an optional briefing for Spark task force members. No decisions were made, but that is online. I think there's another question about a person starting a new business. Are they eligible for funding in round 2? I don't know the specific answer to that, unfortunately. I know once I do get an answer to that, I'll let you all know maybe on Friday, but I don't have a specific answer to that right now. Who's responsible for payback of funds following the federal audit after our direct aid plans have been approved by the state, the county, or the state? So I think what you're asking is if the state provides a review on the direct aid plan, does that make the state responsible for all of those expenditures? And so when we're providing you responses on the direct aid plan, we will, to the best of our ability, provide you a determination on if we believe that is eligible or not. And so I don't have a specific answer on how all of that will work as it relates to a federal audit in terms of process, but the fact that we did provide you a approval or a review of this plan, or we did say that this is an eligible expense versus that is an eligible expense, I assume will be taken into account as we do all of these, as we do a federal audit. But the county will still be responsible for funds that have come into the county. So if you're doing a business grant program, for example, and you're granting out funds that were then used improperly, or you're transferring funds, or an approved expenditure was then used improperly by a subrecipient or what have you, those are still responsible at the county level. And additionally, you should be keeping records of how of all the supporting documentation for any proposals. But I know that a part of that audit process will include the fact that you did submit preliminarily these specific plans, and that we did provide you a determination if it's eligible or not eligible. But again, there's that whole other side of how things get implemented as well. Again, the links in the presentation should be able to work even though they're on PDF form if you download it on the website. If business proceeds are taxable for nonprofit businesses, then the county needs to issue a 1099 for the amount. Is that correct? I don't know the answer to that question. I included a link to the IRS's website in the presentation. I would check there first and check with your finance staff about what the general procedures are. I don't have a specific answer to that question right now. When we submit for small business grants, what supporting documentation will the state be looking for to support the loss of business or revenue, business interruptions? If you're talking about the round 2 program that Samir just talked about, you'd have to look to the specific application once that comes out for that program. If you're talking about your own programs at the county level, it is up to you how you want to structure those programs. Once the commerce program comes out and the application comes out and the details come out, you'll be able to see how they structured their program, and you can structure it very similarly at the local level. And so I would wait for, I think Samir said tomorrow the application will go live, and so you may be able to get some more detail on that. What is the determination for substantially dedicated to payroll purposes, majority of a day, week, pay period? I believe that we've given some guidance as it relates to a majority of hours for that period dedicated to COVID-19 related activities, or if it's, you can credit planning activities, for example, only for those hours that you specifically did those COVID-19 related activities. And so if you want to credit the entirety of a pay period, they have to spend the majority of their hours for that pay period on COVID-19 related activities. If you want to credit specific hours for public health planning, for example, you can do so, but you can only credit those specific hours. Have you heard anything on extending the CARE timeframe to next year, 2021? I think you're referring to federal negotiations. We have not heard anything as it relates to federal negotiations or any changes as it relates to timeframe. As of right now, December 30th is the date that is the last drop dead date as for incurring costs for this program. Can you go back to slide 21, please? I will here, give me 1 second. I don't see anything as it relates to contracts over 50,000 on this slide. I think you may be referring to an earlier slide. Oh, maybe this one. Oh, so this one is specifically related to the new federal reporting requirements that came out on 7/31. We will provide you an additional reporting spreadsheet that will encompass these reporting requirements, but that federal reporting does include specific metrics that they're wanting to track for any loans, grants, contracts over 50,000. And so if you go on the Department of Treasury website, you can see, and maybe we'll even post that federal reporting requirements on our website. And so you'll see what that document looks like, but we'll give you a spreadsheet that will take that into account. Again, that doesn't change anything that you do for 815. We have not yet paid any subrecipient money. So when I include their subrecipient expenditure tabs in our Excel, do I list it on the county reimbursement tab for the full dollar amount of the subrecipient reimbursement on a row for each city USD, and just annotate that it all has to be paid after approval? That is currently how I have it set up. There should be a subrecipient tab on the reimbursement reporting spreadsheet, and so if you have reimbursements that are going to a subrecipient as a city or USD, I would put it in the subrecipient tab so that it is clearly illustrated that the subrecipient is the one that's receiving it. There's some questions about, do I treat my health department as a subrecipient? No. If it's a county agency, then put it on the county tab. If it's a subrecipient, as in a school or a city or something that's outside the specific county government or county agency, then put that in the subrecipient tab. A business that was ready to open their doors when COVID hit couldn't. Would they be eligible for assistance? I think you're referring to the round 2 program. I would check the application and eligibility when that comes out tomorrow. But as it relates to your specific county level programs, as long as you can illustrate that they have been impacted by COVID-19, you can provide them grant funds for income losses or business interruption law. So they have to be able to illustrate business interruption. And so as long as you can illustrate that and specifically related to COVID-19, you will be, under the current guidance, able to provide them a grant. If we do establish a grant program with a limit for each business of 250, if not all funds are used, can we reallocate the remaining balance? Yes, you can reallocate the remaining balance to the program, another program. Again, it all has to be completed by 12/30, and so make sure that you establish these programs knowing that they should be completed by 12/30. Thanks. So Leslie, there's a question about, so will we hear something back that your review is finished? I don't know how the consultants will handle it. My understanding currently is that you will receive some notification from our office that the review is completed and you're good to go, that there isn't anything that needs to be changed. Is the reimbursement reporting file and the direct aid plan are both going to be approved on the basis of first come, first serve, and so the ones that were sent in first will be reviewed first. If we will be using a outside agency to help with administering the grant, will they hear on ineligible items, or will it come directly to the county, or both? So whoever is listed as your primary county contact and is the one that's listed in the direct aid plan as the person that's signing for that direct aid plan is going to be the one that hears it. And so if you're that person, you're responsible for giving it to whoever's helping you administer things. I'm assuming that on the reimbursement form, each subrecipient receives a new tab according to the subrecipient form, same questions that are direct aid spreadsheet. It's up to you how you want to do it. If you can fit all of them on the one tab, that's fine. If you want to put them in separate tabs to help you organize, that's okay too. When we review them, it's not going to impact how we review them. So if we were running a small business program, do we have to do a subrecipient tab for each one? So I think you're referring to how we are going to report these programs moving forward. So if you're setting up a small business program and you're worried about how you're going to have to report that program moving forward, we understand that it's going to be incredibly difficult for you to put individual line items as it relates to exactly how each subrecipient was provided a reimbursement. And so we'll give you an updated spreadsheet about how to track those programs, but we'll give you some additional information on that when we have our new spreadsheet. But as of right now, you need to be keeping records in your county, or plan to keep records in your county about how much you've given out to each of those businesses that you're providing grants to. follow up on an earlier question. So I'm including all the subrecipient reimbursement tabs in our county submission since we haven't paid them anything yet. And on my county tab, I wouldn't list any transfers yet. Yeah, that's correct. And so the thing I would say is don't double count them. So if you're going to provide them, you need to put them in one place. So if you have a bunch of reimbursements that you're going to give to cities and schools and you have them in subrecipient tab, then it's fine. If you're going to, but don't also put them as a transfer in your county tab, because then it's confusing about what the total is. So if you're going to put them somewhere, put all the reimbursements that you're going to provide to a city or a school in the subrecipient tab, and all the reimbursements that you're providing yourself as a county in the county tab. When talking about an entire payroll, we did take all of EMS every call as a risk. Again, we don't know what the new federal guidance is going to look like. Our recommendation is to be a little bit more conservative with how you're doing payroll, and because I know that the reason we're saying that is because we know that there has been some talk about making the payroll portion of it maybe a little bit. Maybe making the payroll portion a little bit tighter. And so we don't know what that's going to look like, but our recommendation is to be a little bit more conservative with how you do payroll and keep it as limited as possible to those that are specifically dedicated to COVID-19. And so as of right now, move forward with the guidance that you have, knowing that our recommendation is to be a little bit more conservative. I know that EMS folks and other public health folks are specifically dedicated because every call is a risk, but knowing that the guidance may tighten, I would caution against doing the entirety of the agency. Again, that's unknowable as we currently stand it, but the whole point of that note and kind of the other notes that we've made is that although it is important to try to make your counties whole as much as possible with the costs that you've incurred during the pandemic, the funds from the CARES Act were specifically designated to deal with the impacts of COVID-19 on a whole host of entities as it relates to the business sector, as it relates to nursing homes, as it relates to schools, and as it relates to childcare and all these other key priorities around disease mitigation and supporting your communities. And one of the things that the federal government was clear on is that the funds can't be used for revenue replacement at the county government level. They did allow you to credit specifically they did allow you to credit individuals that were specifically dedicated to COVID-19. But again, we don't know what that's going to look like if they provide additional guidance. I'm just trying to give you a sense of what the intent of the federal legislation is, to give you a sense of how to say yes or no to different payroll requests. When you say specifically dedicated to COVID-19, does that exclude sheriffs and officers and judicial center clerks that were paid hazard pay? Again, that were paid hazard pay are excluded. So again, it's a determination about were they, and I'll go back to that slide here. I don't remember where I put it. So I'll go back. Could they be considered a public safety, public health, healthcare, human services, or similar employee who themselves were substantially dedicated or mitigating their responding to COVID-19? And so they themselves, their primary job duty has to be substantially dedicated or to mitigating or responding to COVID-19. The guidance specifically says you can't provide across the board hazard pay to all your employees just because that they were operating their duties in a time of COVID-19. They themselves have to be specifically dedicated to COVID-19. And that includes public health folks, healthcare folks, human services folks that were specifically dedicated to mitigating the disease. And so from my understanding, that means were a majority of their hours dedicated to specifically mitigating the disease. If so, then hazard pay is allowed. If not, then hazard pay is not allowed, and they can't be credited if they're not substantially dedicated to COVID-19. And so it does become iffy if you have people that were just because of the nature of their job, were dealing with COVID-19, but weren't specifically dedicated to COVID-19. I know that all of the things that I'm saying are coded in this kind of cryptic federal language, but again, that's all we have to work with as well. And so we're providing you a recommendation or some interpretation of what we think. The federal guidance is continuing being updated. We have pushed on the federal government, as is other states, to stop giving us substantial changes in the federal guidance. So that, because we know that we're trying to implement a lot of these programs, but they still continue to give us changes. And so if we do so, we'll communicate those. It's a partnership, but we don't know when those are going to happen. Again, I just can give you what we've been given from the federal government, give our take or interpretation of what that is, and let you all make your best guess decisions and work in a partnership for arriving at what that determination is as it relates to payroll. I know that's a big issue, and we've heard that that continues to be a big issue. So that's all I have, and I don't see any other questions in the chat here. Bruce, do you have anything else on your end as it relates to questions that I may have missed? I know there was a lot of talk today as it relates to a lot of different new federal guidance, and I know it's confusing and difficult, but I appreciate everybody staying plugged in and engaged, and we'll continue to provide as much guidance as we can and help this to make this as smooth as possible, but appreciate everyone's patience.
No, but yeah, I didn't see anything that you missed. You batted 1,000 again, as always. So is there anything else from you? If not, I'll wrap us up and get us home.
So again, one thing, I mean, what we'll continue to do is ensure that as we are getting these reports, that we're providing you some sort of basic notification that says we have received reports, and that'll go to your primary county contact. In the coming days, we'll give you some more details on how we are doing the review process, so you guys can start to get going once you receive a response. And if we do receive federal guidance, we will provide that to you. But we are also waiting on bated breath for additional federal guidance, and we will give you that as soon as we get that. I think there's a question about a DONS number. I don't know the answer to that, John. I will get back to you. I don't know if we provide any requirements on that. It may be specific to a program, but I don't know if we've asked for that at all. I don't think so. So I'm going to answer the last two questions here because we have a few minutes here, Bruce. Is there any concern that the state's interpretation for private schools will be non-compliant with the rules for private school equitable distribution? This is a standard requirement for federal funding to schools. So I think what you're asking is as it relates to round 2. And so we've followed all of the guidance that has been given to us, or the rules and regulations that relates to us, of how we disperse the funding. And that is specifically that it has to be related to COVID-19. In the state of Kansas, that means the Office of Recovery, the Spark Committee, and in this case, the State Finance Council all work together to approve those funds and determine the best way to implement them. And round 1 is specifically done at the county level, and we follow all of the federal requirements. I don't know specifically if there's any, I don't believe there's any specific requirements as it relates to school distributions. We have provided funds based on the priorities as outlined by the Spark Committee. And so we will continue to use that process and follow the requirements of the CARES Act. How detailed will per capita appropriations to schools need to be COVID documented? And so if you're providing a blanket appropriation or a transfer to a school, they need to be illustrating to you via that direct aid plan and through subsequent reporting forms how they're planning on spending that money. And so they need to be illustrating to you clear COVID-19 related expenses. And so if they're spending, they can't be telling you through the direct aid plan or telling you through a subsequent reporting sheet that they're spending money on something that isn't COVID-19 related. I think any specific questions on labeling the tabs on the reports by entity name or by transfer 1, 2. So I would probably name it as like if you're doing based on like school transfer 1, school transfer 2, or city transfer 1, city transfer 2. I think that might be the easiest for us to track here and for you all to track as well. On the DUNS number, I know that Josh mentioned that it might be available, that question might be available when the portal opens tomorrow. So you'll be able to see that in terms of the commerce program for businesses. So watch out for that. I don't know if there's any other questions today. And we will, again, have some time on Friday for any last minute questions. And we're in the home stretch here. I appreciate everyone's work, and it's been an incredible amount of work in a small amount of time. So thanks, Bruce, and
Okay.
We'll sign off.
All right, so folks, I know I see some people dropping off, but real quick, let me have just 2 minutes of your time. As Vijay had alluded to, Kim, myself, and Jay in our office got to meet with Doug yesterday and touch bases with him. He's going to be Vijay's replacement starting hopefully on Friday. And so he had a couple of questions for us that we kind of pondered amongst ourselves and tried to give some feedback, but I'm opening this up to you all. And so if you don't mind, send me your feedback via the email after we hang up here. Once again, Chladni at kansascounties.org. And the 2 questions that Doug had posed us was what was working with these with the relationship that we have right now with the recovery office, and what wasn't working. Did we have any issues? Did we have some problems? Anything going on? And quite frankly, we felt that we were both at a spot where we were doing great. I know there were some issues starting off with communication and getting word out, and us getting information and then getting information to you all. And it was a very some lag time there, and we were actually getting some information at the same time the media was. And I know there was a lot of issues, but I thought we've worked some of those out. But if there's still some issues out there that we're not aware of with the KAC office, please send me a note and let me know that we can work on them as we continue to work forward as a group and as an organization. And then the other issue, and I'm going to go way off script here, and I don't know if this is appropriate to ask, but another question that Doug had asked us was, did we have a good feeling for how much of the recovery money that's out there, of that $400 million, is not going to get used by you all? So we really, Jay and myself and Kim really couldn't answer that. We hadn't really heard one way or the other. So if you are in a position to where you're willing and able to just send us a quick email saying, hey, we've tried to spend everything that we've got, but we're going to come up short. We're going to have, $50,000, or we're going to have $10,000, or we're going to have $100,000 left over. Please let us know, and maybe there's something we can do to help you, but it also gives us an opportunity to kind of get an idea of, okay, where are we looking at, and what's the possibility of money that's going to be available for round 3. So just if you get a second and you're comfortable doing that, please don't hesitate to send us a real quick email letting us know roughly if you're not going to spend all of your allocation. So with that, we look forward to seeing all of you on Friday. Until then, we will have this presentation posted hopefully in the next couple of hours, if not by the end of business close today, definitely by tomorrow sometime in the morning. So share the link with your colleagues and friends that weren't able to join us today, and or go back there and review any of the information that you weren't sure of. So with that, folks, have a great rest of the day and be safe, and we'll see everybody on Friday. So take care now. Bye-bye.